are wise. We know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Welcome to the show. We got Cheryl Beth.
Oh, that was perfect.
I was like, man, you've been through a lot lately, so I'm gonna like this is what all your clients think about you. All right, guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and we have such a special guest with us today. I want to welcome to the show, Mrs. Cheryl Beth Kuchler. Welcome to the show, Cheryl Beth.
Hey, thank you, Darius, for having me. Very, very fun. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm so excited. You have the best laugh, by the way. I don't think I've told you that. Everyone always tells me I have a great laugh, but you have an amazing laugh. Let's do a little housekeeping. So, guys, the format of the show is very simple. We're bringing together a thought. I'm rusty. I haven't done this in a week. So we're bringing together change makers who are living their passions to create greatness in the world around them. And we are no short of greatness or passion with Cheryl Beth. So we are very lucky to have her here. A couple of things to know about live streaming. We are live. Start a watch party. Ask us questions. And I do have my team on standby, so they'll be shooting over the questions to us. So we'll be answering them live as they come over. And like I said, today we do have a really special guest. Today I was off all week. I was in San Francisco shooting this course I'm doing. So I was looking forward to this. I'm like, man, who do I want to have at the end of the week? And Cheryl Beth appeared in my life once again. And here we are. So I do want to give you guys a little bit of background on Cheryl Beth. And Cheryl Beth, I forgot to tell you this. I don't ever do like the formal bios. I kind of tweak them a little bit.
No, never color in the lines, Darius.
No, I'm so coloring on the walls. So Cheryl Beth is an entrepreneur, and she's founder and CEO of the CEO Think Tank. She's a scaling up coach. And I am actually a former client of hers. So she was my scaling up coach for many years. And I just added this at the end because I was like, what's the best way to describe Cheryl Beth? I'm like, oh, she's an all-around badass who's out there who's out there in the world kicking ass and taking names and really pushing people to be their best. So welcome to the show, Cheryl Beth.
Thank you. In a kind and compassionate way.
Very much so. Very much so. You're all about working with the enlightened leaders. So
thanks, Darius.
How have you been? How's it going?
It has been, as Vern Harnish, I think, said, it's been like a marathon through a minefield. Wow. The last 4 months, Darius.
Yeah. And so, we've talked a little bit, but you get a front row seat to, how many companies are you guys working with through the different groups you're with?
It ranges anywhere from 25 to 30. Right. We had, and all of them actually, except for one, has made it through. Like we had one event company, unfortunately, that we just started working with 6 months prior to COVID, but every single one of them, I am so proud of them. They have just done an amazing job, and everyone got PPP money. Everybody's been managing financially. Some of them have been growing like crazy and been able to take advantage of the current environment. But it's been great. I mean, from that standpoint, it's great working with such a good group.
So let me ask you a question. So you've been doing this coaching now for almost 20 years, right?
Yep, in the small mid-market space for 20 years. Yes. 2 decades.
Well, like I started working with you 6 years ago, and so you'd been doing it for a while then, and so like obviously in that time frame you had 9/11 happen, you had 2008, 2009 Great Recession happen, and then now you have this whole new world of pandemic, and so obviously those are some pretty big those are big, right? Even if you go back before 2001, you had, you know, the dot-com bubble implode as well, which I know you're in the Northeast. I don't know how much that affected you guys, but what do you think is different this time around? Like, you know, and you have plenty of experience in business even before doing your current business. What do you think is different, or what are you seeing that's different from with your clients this time around than maybe 10 years ago, or even 15, 17 years before then?
Oof. From an environment standpoint or from a client standpoint? I mean, from an environment.
Both, whatever.
I mean, from an environment standpoint, you know, it's, you know, 9/11 was a black swan, right? I mean, it was a, like, sort of a one-time event, but that completely blew everybody out of the water. And I don't mean that, you know, no pun intended there. I mean, that was significant. I mean, I still remember, you know, driving. I actually remember being at a client meeting and having somebody come in and say, you know, there's a plane that's gone into the World Trade Center, and we thought it was like a small plane. But just the whole ripple effect at that point, and then all the implications over the next couple of years, versus what's happened now, which is there seems to be no end to the uncertainty, right? And you know, I know that you said nothing's off limits, but given our complete lack of leadership at the federal level for managing this, in the US, I mean, I just got off the phone this morning with one of my clients who's in Germany. You know, they've been doing a much better job in Europe, and around, you know, Canada, all those folks than we have. So it's not just the pandemic, it's the complete lack of compelling and forceful and on the, you know, unambiguous leadership that is going to cause a ripple effect that's going to be much more like we had back in 2008, right? Where you had, as you know, right, we had a couple of years basically of people struggling and you know, this ripple effect.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of ironic too, because the administration we have is very pro-business, right? And I actually feel like their pro-businessness has screwed them on this, right? Because they've been so myopic around how to handle this pandemic. It was like, we can't shut down, we can't have the markets fall. Like, being so focused on that happening have stopped them from doing what you're talking about, which is forceful leadership around, you know, really getting everyone aligned and getting everyone to work together cohesively, right, to combat this disease the proper way, right? The way, and I don't, you know, I mean, look, it's easy to say the proper way, right? Because it's
according to what public health and scientists and all those would have told us.
Science. That's a hoax.
I mean, I've also, you know, I also read most of the great influenza, the book about 1918, right? Mm-hmm. And shades of like deja vu. We're making some of the same mistakes today that we made 100 years ago. You know, I'm an engineer. You know me, right? I'm an engineer, but I was first in love with chemistry, so I get the whole scientific issue, and science is not an exact 1 + 1 = 2.
That's a hoax. Quit with all your hoax talk over here. Everyone knows that when Fauci says it should be something, if it doesn't happen, it means everything's a hoax.
Yeah.
Gosh.
You would appreciate, this is taking us who knows where, but my sister, God love her, is an assistant principal, but she originally was a science teacher down, and she's in Northern Virginia. And she said, you know, the problem with you engineers is that there's rules in engineering, right? There's all these, you know, Bernoulli's equation, and there's equations like Bernoulli's equation. That's like how we know that airplanes can lift off the ground, right? In science, basically, there's 3 rules, and everything else is a hypothesis and an experiment.
Yeah. Well, you know what I think? I actually think this is where, like, we as a country are getting bit in the ass because we have such a shitty science program for our education system. Like, what I'm noticing on Facebook, which is where all facts happen and where all truths come out, is that is that there's this consensus around when the scientists aren't right about this, that it's all fake, right? And I was like, oh, and I really just realized this when you said it, because I was like, my stepfather was a chief of diabetic science for Abbott Labs.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, look, like, we need more information. We test it. Even when we test it, we get false positives. And he's like, and then we go and we keep testing.
Right.
And the problem is most people want definitive black and white answers, and they're impatient. And so you have this population that wants definitive answers. They're impatient. And then when they don't get the answers they want, there's, fuck it. Like, let's go to the beach and be around a bunch of people because it's fake.
Yeah.
Right. And
exactly.
so I look at that and I'm like, I mean, and now the and I'm friends with a bunch of conspiracy theorists out there who are Trump lovers. And so now their thing is that all the numbers are fake because we're trying to rig the election. Yeah. That's the new thing. There's a bunch of new shit. That's one of the new things.
Although the fact that it's a global issue doesn't really, like, there's
I just said, that's real easy. Let's just A/B test against Canada. How about that? Like, I don't need, how would I A/B test against every other modern economy?
Right.
And when we come out fucked up and we're not taking it seriously, the only variable that's different is our stupidity. How about that?
Yeah. Well, and so for me, two things. One is it continues to reinforce through all those things that you talked about, right? Like 9/11 and then the recession, and now is that the importance when you're trying to be a business person and an enlightened leader is to have a strong culture, right? Have very clear, this is who we are, this is how we operate, have a plan, even if the plan has to change, face the brutal reality, have core capital account, like all the best practices that we've been teaching for the last 12 or 13 years. Having those in place, because literally that's the only thing that's gonna stand a chance of helping you to get through this.
Right.
So for me, the experiment that we've been running with CEO Think Tank for the past 20 years has actually proven to be viable, right? We've had a lot of people who have come back and said, wow, like, you guys, it's okay. You've been a bitch, Cheryl Beth, for the last few years because it's helping us get through this. So that's the good, that's one of my biggest learnings is there aren't any, you can't guarantee anything, Darius. Like, stuff happens, tsunamis happen, hurricane, like all those things happen, right?
I always say it's one of these. It's the flip of the coin, right? That business is like 50% of it is total fucking luck. Like our business, like a good example would be like at TMS, we had in 2018, we had the 10-year treasury peak, and in like, I don't know, like a year it bottomed, right? It's like there's no rhyme or reason to that. And most people are like, so what? I'm like, dude, that's a massive effect if you have, I don't know, $30 billion worth of mortgages that start refinancing off your books, right? Because you have the biggest move in the history of moves, because our dumb shit president wants to go to war with China on trade, right? And so sorry, I know there's Trump lovers out there. He's smart guy. He's a smart guy too. But and actually, it's funny enough. I actually think the going to war with China, I think the trade thing was something we should have done, right? So it just sucks that the markets reacted the way they did. So that was actually, if you were saying,
maybe not in quite the way that it was done. Like,
well, right. That's actually the issue wasn't that it was done; it was the uncertainty.
Not about the content; it's about the process, Darius.
Yeah, my biggest issue with him is delivery. It's not necessarily content. I mean, some of it's content, but you're making a good point. Is that you can only control. I can't control that Trump's going to one day be bipolar about trade and the next day be all for making a deal. All I can control is how am I running my business, and that's really where
my life, right? And with my family and kids and all that stuff, right? I mean,
totally.
That's it.
So for you, when you look at your you guys have been running this really tight discipline with your the enlightened leaders, all the CEOs and their companies that you've been working with for all these many years. And I was on the other side of that, so I totally saw that. And for me, I was like, yeah, this is all I can control is what I can control, right? Like I can't control like I said, the flip of the coin side of it, but I can control the strategy, the operations, how I manage the people, what am I doing from an accountability standpoint. So when you're looking at the teams you've been working with for all these years, we come into this pandemic, an invisible strand of RNA starts killing people by the millions. And are we at 1 million deaths yet worldwide? I don't know. Maybe we're not there yet.
Yeah, I was going to say we're not there yet.
Yeah, it won't happen. It's a hoax. It's not going to happen. But yeah, we'll get there. Trust me. Well, there's a will, there's a way. But when you when you see that something like that, this invisible thing comes in and totally flips the world on its head, totally flips the business, world on its head. I was talking to Andy Bailey about this last week, actually. I said, you could be running the best freaking hotel in the world. Daily huddles, column 7, accountability, dashboard, everyone's aligned, everyone's singing the same songs. Business has been crushing it. 25% year-over-year growth, 30% year-over-year growth, every single year, 15 years in a row. RNA strand comes and starts being ingested by people who flew in from Wuhan, and half your staff is going home sick, and then no one's showing up to book rooms. Then everyone's canceling trips. All of a sudden, your revenue drops. By the way, I don't know if you know this, I did actually live through an experience that was almost exactly the same as a hotel experience, where my revenue dropped by 80% overnight.
Right.
When I was a subprime mortgage lender, and I literally went from I went from
you talked about that
$1 million a month in revenue to $200,000 a month in revenue, and it was like July to August.
I was going to say, all you have to do is watch the Big Short, right? And see all the people packing up their boxes and leaving.
I was watching that show and I'm like, what was I doing on that day when that guy was talking about that? I'm like, oh, fuck, I wasn't thinking what he was thinking. So what's funny though, is this is my biggest learning from this, which is I'm going to say something really obvious right now. Yeah. And I don't know if you have hotel clients, but I'm using this as just to make an extreme example. Your expenses accrue, like your revenue comes in and you're paying for expenses that already happened, right? So when your revenue gets hit really hard, right, where it goes down really fast, your expenses don't fall for another 90 days, right? So what ends up happening is it's a huge cash drain happens because your cash flow gets crushed and there's no new cash to replenish. And so what happened to me when that happened was my cash went from, I think I was a small business then. I had like $1.5 million of cash in the business. I went from 1.5 to 300 grand overnight. And it was like, I said I was like living in this big, like I was like a little kid in his dad's suit, right? I had this huge office, big expenses, big fixed contracts, and there was nothing I could do. It was a really bad, painful experience.
That's what I meant about all the decisions and choices you make about your life, not just about your business.
Right.
Well, and it gets back to, for me, the number one thing is, as Greg Brenneman, he's the guy that turned around Continental and has written a couple books, says, is have a fortress balance sheet. There is a reason that you have a fortress balance sheet. There's a reason that, Greg Crabtree talks about core capital accounts, honest, like Jim Collins, same thing, like having, he talks about in Great by Choice, the differences between Amundsen and Scott and going to the South Pole, and Amundsen had, and even in the Mount Everest disaster that happened back in the 90s, that Into Thin Air is based on, right? They had extra when they filmed the IMAX movie, they had extra oxygen. Like that's the whole point. Like you gotta have some type of foundation, which is hard when you're trying to scale or your ego gets in the way. And quite frankly, I continue to find that that's the biggest issue for so many leaders is their ego. Like ego is a very dangerous friend to have.
Yeah, it's so funny you just brought this up. So I was just watching this TED, while I was teeing up my Bill Withers Lean on Me for You.
Yeah.
Like I always end up like kind of like, I'm going, YouTube always has TEDx talks come up, and a TEDx talk came up, and it was a guy talking about the former CEO and founder of Avis Rent-A-Car, and
Right.
and his whole TED talk was the most scarce resource in the world is leaders who don't have an ego. and what was funny
All
is
about humility, Darius. You don't know everything.
No, I think so. Maybe this is, I don't know if this is a good or bad time, because I was like, I consider myself to have a pretty low ego for a leader. But
Or
then,
not, or yeah, that's true.
and my sister would argue different, but and my wife would, and
But I've actually gotten crap about that. Like when I said, when people ask, well, who are the types of, when you say enlightened leader, what does that mean? I'm like, well, you can't really be an entrepreneur without some type of ego, right? I mean, it just doesn't work. But I said the ones that we work with have a tendency to also have some humility to go along with it.
Yeah. There was this, I'll read you this quote. I just thought of this. You're making me think of this right now. And what I want to do is kind of dovetail into this and go into like how you see this, how has this played out from how these types of leaders how's that perspective helped them lead. But I read this quote last night. Okay. Do you know Sam Harris? You follow him?
Nope.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, here it is. So Sam, you should check him out. I love him. He's amazing. So Sam Harris, he wrote a book. He's written a bunch of books, but he's a very famous author. He's a neuroscientist from Stanford.
Cool.
And he has a podcast called Waking Up. I think it's called Waking Up. But he has he has a meditation app called Waking Up, and it's like the best. Like it's like if do you meditate, by the way?
I do. I have. Yeah, we can go into that whole thing too.
Okay. Well, anyway, if you like meditation, check him out, because especially since you have a science background, like he's very good for like left brain process driven people. Like, I mean, he's like literally the guy changed my life. So I follow him on Instagram, and he wrote, "Believing that one is perfectly enlightened is rather like driving a car without brakes." Right. So it's funny. It's like you have to have the humility to know that it's, and essentially then he writes that the path to enlightenment is never ending. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the humility you're talking about. So when you look at these leaders, obviously they can control the process, so they can control the plan, and they control the discipline, and they can do what they can to save up, for a rainy day. And they're following your guidance as their coach, and with the CEO think tank, where you guys are really pushing them hard to do all these things. And I think those are tactical in some sense, right? Those are like this checklist of things you can do.
Right.
And then there's the keeping their freaking ego in check, which is, that's a checklist item, kinda. It's like, right. That's like me telling, that's like my core value thing. It's like asking me what they have core values. Like, yeah, I have core values. And I'm like, what are they? And then right. Then they have to think about it. I'm like, that's weird. It's like, you either know them or you don't. Right. So what do you think, like when you look at your enlightened leaders and you say that there's some humility involved, how do you think that has served them in this current, crisis moment?
Well, I mean, first of all, it made them open, right? I mean, humility for me is, I mean, it goes back, I mean, and the humility that I reference actually comes out of, if you're familiar with Saint Benedict from way back when, he's like considered like the father of Western monasticism, but he actually wrote what he calls the rule, and it has 12 steps to humility. And the first one is similar to the 12-step program, right? Alcoholics Anonymous, which is, I don't know everything. Like there's I'm not in control. Right. And that there's a higher power, that there, whatever your belief system is, Darius, right? It's, I'm not in control. I don't know everything. so I'm open to the idea that I might not know everything, and that there might be other people out there that can help me, that can assist me, um, all that type of thing. And and then the second step for me is a willingness to learn, right? We sort of talk about lifelong learners and all that type of stuff, but there's some people that just like read a bunch of books, like they're like book jock, or they listen to all this stuff, but they're not applying any of it. So it's gotta be tied to, like, for me, it's gotta be tied to a practical application and an accountability to actually take what you're learning and do something with it, as opposed to just, absorbing it all. And that's like, you can like see behind me, that's like, you're familiar with the rubber chicken, like that's why we have one, right? It's because ultimately, if we're teaching you this stuff and you need to be applying it and you're not, that rubber chicken is going to show up someplace to hold you accountable. You've got to, you got to pull your big boy or big girl panties on and be accountable and responsible.
Yeah.
I mean, I always say it's common sense. It's just not common practice. There's that whole intention versus ability, intention versus execution gap from like neuroscience.
Right.
I'm trying to remember exactly what that is, but
No,
anyway.
I know what you're talking about. Hey, we have a question, by the way. I just want to jump on it. So, people are giving me a hard time, like, you need to keep looking at the screen, man. You look at it. I'm like, fuck you.
That's right, because you keep looking up.
I'm like, I have 3 screens, and like, by the way, it's not like there's a freaking like camera built into my monitor. I have to look at a monitor while I'm talking to a person. Anyway,
what is the question?
So I'm looking away. What's your best kept secret for helping companies turn the ship around and make major changes? So let's assume that you have someone that's flailing or failing. What's your best kept secret for that?
For flailing. Well, I can say that we don't do turnarounds. Like, so that is not an area of expertise. There are people that do turnarounds a heck of a lot better than we do. I mean, it's sitting down and doing what you would consider foundational work, right? This isn't rocket science. It's common sense. It's not common practice. Most basic business practices are simple. They've been around for decades. It's not, I mean, neuroscience is great because neuroscience has actually now told us why human beings do what they do. Like we have much more understanding of how the brain operates and all that type of stuff. But this is not, I mean, shit, I learned a lot of this stuff back at Procter and Gamble back in 1984.
Yeah, can you dive into that? Because and I meant to go there and I forgot to, like before you became started this business CEO think tank helping mid-market companies scale, like when you were at Procter and Gamble, what was your background that really got you interested in this part of the biz?
Well, all right. So I'm an engineer, right? A chemical engineer, very process oriented. I love to understand stuff. And I am, I studied chemical engineering, quite frankly, because when I was young and naive, I was going to study chemistry to become a doctor. And then I found out that if I studied because I wanted to become a medical doctor, if I studied chemical engineering, if I didn't get into med school, because it was hard to get into med school, I could still end up getting a job and make money. So that was that was it. My mother was very clear. She said, you need to be able to support yourself. This is back in the 70s and 80s. So, I mean, but the cool thing about Procter was that I probably got a $250,000 management education. Like they were doing all sorts of quote revolutionary things, Darius, like back in the 70s, like they were hiring 50% women engineers when the general population of women in engineering was 20%. They were actively teaching, they were actively doing 360s, and they were putting their undergrads, that they brought out of college into management training programs right off the bat. I mean, I got 3 days of training right off the bat, management training, when I started there, and I had a 90-day onboarding process.
Nice.
So just learning all these, and every time I'd come, I talked to my parents, and my dad actually worked at DuPont for 36 years. And every time I would get on the phone with them and say, well, we did this today. And he's like, that you're working at a really unusual company. They were giving 6-month, they had 6-month childcare leave back in the 1980s, right? Nobody had child care, like not maternity leave, like you could be a guy and take leave. Now, didn't always play, but I mean, they were doing those types of things way back when, before it became a thing. So
who's the CEO pushing that
at the time?
Yeah, I gotta assume there was a CEO or an executive team that was making that a priority.
Yeah, it was Pepper. I mean, you have to get, like, Procter was really good at, they knew that their major customer was women, right? So it only made sense that they worked and had a really strong diversity program. They understood the fact that they had, their employee population had to reflect their customer population.
Yeah, but even that insight is something most people don't like put 2 and 2 together on, right? If you're transactional, commoditized mindset, right? That is a completely holistic positioning for a business to realize that how I treat my employees is how my employees are going to treat my customers.
Well, but they also had, everybody talks about like all this stakeholder, what's the capitalist, the guy that wrote, who started Whole Foods, like conscious capitalism.
John Mackey, stakeholder.
Yeah. But Procter had 5-sided responsibility back in the 70s and 80s. Like it was not just about the shareholder. It was about employees. It was about the community. It was about the environment. The customer. So it was all 5 of those things. I mean, I remember my operations manager sitting down and saying, I'm going to, 5-sided responsibility. That's what this means. Like, and, you hear as a young 22-year-old, like, okay, like, sure, this makes sense to me.
Well, that's so funny. Where I keep landing in this part of the conversation with you is that they had a language around their behavior, right? And then they had
Mahupini. It was Mahupini values. Like our number one value at Mahupini, which was their biggest manufacturing facility way back when, where we made Bounty paper towels and Charmin and Pampers and stuff, and they had a huge pulp mill and a paper plant. Was do the right, do what is right. I mean, I still remember sitting in management meetings and people asking, what is the right thing to do here? That was their number one. And everybody understood what that meant, Darius. I mean,
let me ask you a question, because so you're totally hitting on something that's super interesting right now. So when's the last time you worked at Procter & Gamble?
I left Procter & Gamble in 1992.
Okay, so I don't know, 28 years ago. Okay, which is, that's enough time for you to like have had other things fill your brain where you're not gonna, where I doubt you shouldn't be able to answer the question I'm gonna ask you right now. You just gave, right? So you just gave one of their core values. How many core values did they have?
Mahupini had, I think we had 6 core values.
Do you remember them?
I don't remember. The number one that I remember is do the right thing. Like what is the right thing to do in this situation?
Do you remember any of the other ones?
I do not remember any of the other ones.
Well, the fact that you even remember one of them is still impressive. So that's where I believe, at least it sounds to me, that they use their, and there's obviously different ways of doing this, but they had a language around how they behaved.
Right? Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so they invested in that, they trained to that, they brought it to life, and then it became, and then my belief, at least from my teachings, is that is one of the ways we control, not one of the ways, I believe it is the way we control the outcomes from a behavioral standpoint, is by controlling the language.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's basically like with my book is essentially that. It's like this like aha moment of like, wow, this is how, like, I didn't even realize I was doing it till after the fact. But we do have the ability to do that. So my question for you is, how do you see when you look at these clients, these enlightened leaders, that they're following the plans? I know, I was a scaling up company, you were my coach. Like I came in, I already had a lot of the stuff baked because I've been studying Vern's work for 15 years.
Yeah, birthing of giants, all that stuff, right?
So, for us, having that be, creating language for the organization was essentially, which is my book, is a playbook on how do you do that? How do you create a language for your organization? When you look at your people, how are they applying that right now in these times? Like, what type of languages are they doing? What are they doing outside of the tactical when you look at from a cultural standpoint? And I always say, like, culture, I hate the word culture, by the way. I don't know if I told you that. I like literally want to be like,
probably you have referenced that.
I'm thinking about making a t-shirt that says fuck culture, because I swear I'm going the other way, because it gets a bad rap. People are like, the execution strategy people are like, some get it and half begrudgingly go along with it. And everyone, and I'm like, well, it's a misused word, right? I mean, it's important, but what's really important is that you operationalize the culture, right? Like, you got to operationalize it, and there has to be massive accountability around it, and there has to be measurement.
You have to live and breathe it every day. Yep.
Yeah, and the number, but even those words are like, how do you live and breathe something, right? It's like those words are these ambiguous words that people, it's like, you and I get what those words mean, but a lot of other people, again, they're like, it's an ambiguous word. How do I live a behavior, right? I get how to live it. You have to go do it. Well, how do I live? Well, let's use, for example, let's say you have a client whose core value is being bold. Okay. How do you live and breathe boldness in your KPI management, right?
Yeah. Well,
you and I can both come up with this, right?
I was going to say, depends on what it means and where it came from.
But the average Joe might have some issues with that. And they might say, like, they'll say it and then not do it. To your point, intent versus execution goes to the side. So my question is twofold for you. When you look at your clients who are operationally running well, they're following their plans, they're being disciplined, they're doing all the things that, you've been cracking the whip on them for years, and they did all the right things without using the word culture, because, like I said, I don't love that word because I think it gets misused. And I don't think you and I are misusing it. I think other people do. How are they applying their values right now to make tough decisions and to do what's best to excel in this environment?
Well, I mean, in a few ways, right? And when COVID first kicked off, like, we did a couple of things. I mean, the first thing that we did was, like, literally when everything started shutting down here, right, on the East Coast, which was the week of March 16th, which will live in infamy.
Right. Black Friday.
March 16th, and then all hell broke loose. And it was happening over that weekend. I got back that I actually went up to, you were asking sort of about my meditation and stuff. So this, I'm an associate at an Anglican monastery, Holy Cross Monastery, up in New York, that has been my lifeline through this. I'm a pretty spiritual person, and that has been a big part of what's kept me going. That Friday, we had our first Friday at 4 call, and we had 65 people on that call. We had current members, we had alumni members, all the people in our community. And the first thing we did was say, go back to your core values, have a core values conversation with your folks about how do we live these right now? Like, go back and remind yourself as the CEO, as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, right? Oh, what are these core values again? Where did they come from? Why do we have them? Along with, and Deb Gabor talks about this, your core purpose, right? That core, and Vern talks about all that, right, in chapter 6 of Scaling Up. But for me, that's the grounding, right? That's the, and even for us, like, our number one core value, which I think comes out of Covey's work, win-win, Like everything has got to be win-win. When we work with clients, it's got to be win-win. When we work with our contractors, everybody that we work with, it's got to be win-win. And Covey says the best time to do that is at the beginning of the relationship, right? And to do calibration as part of that. So, automatically sort of shifting into that. Okay, so what does this mean? Like, how can we make this a win-win given all the ambiguity? What do we need to do? And then the second core value is to practice what we preach. So I was doing the exact same thing, right? I was meeting with my strategic CFO around my financials that we were talking about. We were just offering the things that we knew that we needed to offer, whether it was a webinar or resources. We threw a whole bunch more people on our Slack channel, Darius. Like we opened up a coronavirus Slack channel and a recession proofing Slack channel. Like we just like made everything almost open source. Like that's, for me, that's practicing what I'm preaching, which is you need to do this now. You need to provide. And I love what Pat Lencioni said in a summit a couple of weeks ago. He said, a CEO isn't really a CEO. Well, you are a CEO, but the other initials behind your name are Chief Reminder Officer, CRO. And it's that like every day, every minute, like, having the friggin' things right up in front of you, like watching your language, giving permission, like, and I love the stories that I've heard from several entrepreneurs and CEOs, and I tell my own folks that they're like, if I'm not living up to this stuff, guys, I'm the one where this is where the buck stops. So you have my full permission. Like if you want to grab the elephant, right, which is why we have the elephant, because my lovely masked out, like sticking the elephant up and saying, Cheryl Beth, you are not living your core values. Jill Hunnelman, God bless her, we were going in to see a client pre-COVID, and I was like lecturing her on the train, and she took a picture of me and she flashes it at me whenever I get on my soapbox.
So funny. Well, you're touching on something that's really important here, which is, I think that, and this is maybe comes down to vulnerability and ego, which is if I'm I think I mentioned this to you. I did a 52-week integral leadership program through Stagen.
Yes.
So I did the Stagen program, and one of the things we learned in Stagen is around knower versus learner mentality, right? Like, Are you a knower? Or are you a learner?
Right.
And then there's Dave Emerald's empowerment, the power of TED. I don't know if you know that. Right? So there's all this thing around, am I going to be a coach? Am I going to be a challenger? Am I going to persecute people? And so a lot of times as leaders, we're showing up, we're the victim, we're persecuting the team, we're the knower. And then we wonder why they're not, performing, when it's like, well, they just don't like you. They don't want to perform for you. Like there's free will that's involved. And I do think, like, I don't disagree with Lencioni in being the chief reminder officer, but I think that there's something around this whole concept of keeping it simple, right? Which is, and this is why
back to the foundations. Like when your caller was asking about, like, what do you do? Like, how do you do this, like, turnaround, or what's your advice? It's like, there are foundational items that you just need to have in place. I mean, the other thing that we haven't touched on, though, Darius, that I think is really important is your own self-awareness as a leader, like your willingness to get feedback, right? Your willingness to take the information in when people are trying to say, hey, you're like, when you do this, like, it's demotivating to me because I feel like I'm being lectured, Cheryl Beth. Like, it's that willingness to, oh crap, it's like Johari Windows stuff. It's like, what's my blind spot as a leader? How much am I really paying attention? I mean, that's one of the things I admire about you, is that, like, you've always been open to feedback.
Oh, I love it.
I know. You're like a feedback glutton.
You want to know why? You want me to tell you the secret behind why I care about it?
Why?
Because, like, I honest to God only care about maximum performance, and I'm so competitive, right? I'm competitive, but in a way where it's like, I'll never, like, it's just inside, right? Where I like in my brain, I'm like, I swear to God, this is the thought I had last week. I'm like, I'm going to make this show bigger than Joe Rogan's show. Like in my brain, like that's where I'm automatically there. Like I don't have, what do I have? Like a couple hundred people watching the show now. I'm like, I got to get 1 million people to watch the show. And so like, and that's crazy think, right? Like I shouldn't be thinking like that because, but then I'm like, well, if I wanted
your
to be,
vision, so why wouldn't it?
well, it's just because like you're setting yourself up for disappointment. But my whole thing is like, why not go big? Like, why should there be a constraint, right? So if you remove all constraints, which I do, I do this in business. I'm like, there are no constraints, right? Like I can be as big as I want to be. There's no constraints. And then the next step is, well, the only way that will happen is if I have 0 blind spots. Like I have to know every single thing I can do to maximize performance. So I actually look at it like almost like how a star athlete would watch videos of themselves and micro look and have someone say, see where you fucked up right there? See where you fucked up right there? Yeah, you see where your toe was off? Like, that's the way I look at it, is I'm like, all I'm doing is having video of it's like game film. Right.
Well, and even you're saying, I mean, it's so funny because like, I remember you even saying, like, we talked about your strengths finder, right? And the fact that like you had like 7 influence talents and like you and you even said to me, you have to be really careful, Cheryl Beth, because I can make you believe anything.
I totally can.
I'm that good.
Because I make myself believe it, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, no, I'm that's one of my superpowers, getting people motivated around what I'm doing.
Yes.
but the enlightenment part is that it's all around performance. And when people are like myopic and think they're the best, I'm like, oh my God. I didn't tell you, there's one other reason why when I was young and inexperienced, I had this moment. I don't think I've told people this story in a long time, where I had this office and my desk was like face the door, and it was like kind of like a diamond shaped office. And so, sorry, I hit the mic. And so I had this big desk. It was in the middle. I was probably 27. I have probably 70, 80 employees. My business had grown literally from like me to 70 employees in like 2 years, right? I'm in my mid 20s and I'm thinking I am the shit. I'm like, and I'm crushing it. Every month I'm making more money than the month before. And I'm on like 24 months straight of this, right? And it was like 6 o'clock at night. And we used to work till like 9 at night because we had telemarketers calling homeowners late, into the evening. Right. And so I swear I did this. I did one of these, like put my feet up on the table, like, and right then I remember I'm like, oh man, I'm the best. I had this like total young, non-enlightened CEO moment. I had my feet on the table. I'm not kidding you. And I just remember that was like the beginning of the end. But like I got like the next 18 months was me getting my freaking ass kicked.
Yes.
Like, and every month thereafter was worse than the month before.
Yeah.
And until it blew up. And so it was just this thing where I realized I'm like, when I was like, and maybe I'm wrong to think this. I said the minute I put my guard down is when I probably need to have my guard most up.
Right. Well, it's funny because you can't see it, but across the room from me is like sort of my like reminder inspiration corner. But one of those reminders is Jim Collins's book, How the Mighty Fall, which is all about how ego will get in your way, how like if you don't pay attention, you are doomed to trip on something.
Well, there's a thing, and I don't know if there's science around this, but there's a thing around like men in their 50s having their biggest failures because they get overconfident.
Oh, interesting.
Like there's this, I don't know the numbers around it, but it's something anecdotally I've seen it a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Where they'll lose all their money in their 50s,
women, so there's a really interesting dynamic that's gender related, where guys actually start, because of the way the brains are wired, where guys start off with more ego and they have to actually get kicked in the butt a bunch in order to like While women, on the other hand, because we're more relationship oriented, actually have to get self-confidence. So like part of the interesting dynamic with with what we do is about half of our clients are actually women CEOs. I think you've actually commented on that before too. Like, and because we're not just about like being disciplined, we're also about boosting people up and giving you the confidence. And that's actually what women need. Women don't have as much of an ego problem as we have a confidence problem.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that has to do with like upbringing too, and you know, like especially
probably a lot.
I think a lot. I think that.
I mean, I'd say half of it is probably brain chemistry and half of it is environment. I mean, that's usually about the right.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. Like if you even look in school, like growing up, there, you know, I mean, I always say it like I mean, I've always been I'm kind of equal opportunity with everybody, and so I would just watch like who would get boosted, and like the women were generally more just on it. You know, they're better students and they're more organized, and the guys, you know, would kind of get a leg up just because they were more gregarious, maybe. You know, right. I mean, dude, listen, I milked the fuck out of that. Okay, so. I totally did. I was the least organized.
I was going to say, that could be a whole nother show, Darius.
Well, I mean, like, I just, you know, I'm just not an organized person, and I didn't like to do work, but I like to influence people. You know, I don't want to do anything. I just want people to come and help me. It's a great entrepreneur, profile.
Right. Get the team around you.
Totally. Yeah, no, this is like right now I'm like total solopreneur style. It's painful for me. I'm like, God, this business needs to be big enough so I can have a team.
Yes.
Well, we're running towards the top of the hour here. A couple things. You have some really cool stuff going on in your neck of the woods. I know you have the series that we were talking about or before the show. Would you mind sharing with the audience some of the big stuff you have going on? I know I think Greg Crabtree's coming to speak to your people.
Yeah, we are attempting to, I mean, he is right now slated to come to Philly, and we're going to live stream him. He's got a new book that's coming out, Simple Numbers 2.0. We had a lot of success with Q2 webinar series, and so we're going to be bringing that back in the fall with Marissa Levin and Karen Kopp and yourself. Yay! In the fall. So that's going to be, our schedule's going to be coming out for that probably by the end of the month. And then, yeah, we're looking right now to grow our CEO think tank community and what I'm calling, and you can check it out on ceothinktank.com, what I'm calling our COVID triangle. So going up to New York, maybe getting a little bit into Massachusetts, because that's where my eldest son is. And so it wouldn't be bad for me to go up to Mass, and then down to DC and out to Harrisburg. That's like right now that's our COVID triangle which is within driving distance, so that people don't have to get on planes and all that type of stuff to get here.
So most of the people that you're inviting to this are going to be in the, you know, kind of that Northeast, Mass, New York, Jersey.
Yeah, mid-Atlantic region. Yeah. And guys, because we don't even know what's going to happen, right? I mean, we have no idea. So.
I mean, I was a client in California, but I will say that if you're anywhere remotely close to any of those areas, that Cheryl Beth and her team are really top notch, and I highly recommend you reach out. So they can find you at ceothinktank.com. Is that what you said?
That is the best place. Yeah.
And when is the event going to be in the fall?
Greg is coming up on the 18th of September. So Friday, the 18th of September is going to be his talk. And then the rest of the schedule will be coming out, like I said, in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
It'll be up on the website.
I'm very excited to be a part of that. That'll be very fun, because my
and if anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Darius, I'm happy to hook up with them there too.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that in the comments is your profile for LinkedIn and for the website. So you can check out the comments from the talk. My team's going to post all that stuff in there. In parting, because we're running up against the end of the show here, I always like to ask people, what would be your last meal on Earth?
My last meal on earth.
Yeah, since we're at COVID times, like let's talk about that.
Oh my heaven, my last meal on earth.
Have you contemplated that before?
I haven't. I don't, you know, like I am not a vegetarian, so, but I'm a really big seafood lovers, and I love like, you know, just sort of a typical Maine, you know, lobster bake, and like hanging out on a beach, just eating lobster and corn on the cob, New Jersey corn on the cob.
Wait. So is that a thing? Like New Jersey corn on the cob versus
Yes, corn on the cob. Yes, New Jersey corn and tomatoes. Like I'm a Jersey girl at heart, and
all right.
give me corn, give me summer corn and tomatoes, and I'm happy.
You know, I've been doing, so every Friday I make pizza and I've been doing tomatoes and corn in my pizza. Have you done that before?
No.
I do it in frittatas on Sundays, which is really good to do. Like corn in a frittata is killer. But in pizza, it's really good too. And I'll mix it with like eggplant. Yeah, I'm making myself hungry right now. So, okay, so
everybody else.
Maine lobster bake. All right, I love it.
Lobster bake, yes.
Well, Cheryl Beth, what a pleasure having you. As always, we always have fun talking to each other. So I'm really happy that things are going well for you and all your people. And I'm really excited to be a part of the series this fall. And yeah, guys, listen, go check out Cheryl Beth. If you're an entrepreneur, CEO, or if you're just someone that wants to learn from someone that's really amazing, follow Cheryl Beth on LinkedIn and or on the CEOthinktank.com. And guys, we have a huge week next week. I was out this week filming the course for the book. And I am now, I think, 5.5 weeks, 6 weeks away from book launch. So my book is coming out.
Yay.
September 15th. And we're going to be really hitting it hard. Please follow us. You can follow the show at The Real Darius M on Facebook. Share it, share watch parties. We're really trying to get a lot of momentum there. And or you can follow me at my website, www.therealdarius.com, and all my socials there. And please sign up. We're going to be doing a bunch of notifications and marketing to everybody about what's happening. And yeah, thank you guys for supporting us. And thank you, Cheryl Beth. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Darius.
All right, guys. We'll see you guys next week.